Good afternoon. You're all very welcome. We'll give it a few minutes before we start. Just let everyone kind of take their seats, uh, get comfortable, because we're going to be spending the next couple of hours together. And we're marking World AIDS Day today. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm always excited looking at the number of participants as they're entering the room. So far, we've got 58. I feel it's almost like a silent auction of sorts. 60, okay. Willing the numbers to grow. I hope this finds you well wherever you are. In fact, if you can, throw into your chat box where you're joining us from, because I think it's nice for us all to live a little bit vicariously by finding out where everybody's joining us. Oh, we got someone from Cavan. Oh, well done. We've got people from Limerick, Balbriggan. This is fabulous. Okay. Belfast. We've got Belfast. Kildare. Oh, God, it's going too fast. Zurich, Cork, New York City. Hey, nice. I like it. I'm joining you from Dublin, the north side, just next to the Phoenix Park. I live so close to the zoo, I can actually hear the lions sometimes. Roaring. I'm not joking. I'm serious. Okay, so we might get started because we have lots to get through today. But you're all very welcome, and we got 77 and rising. So you're very welcome. My name is Dil Vikramasinghe, or my full name is Mihinda Kulasurya Nancy Laya Dilhani Vikramasinghe. That's not my address. That's not my life story. That's my actual name, but you can call me Dil. And I have a feeling this is my 5th year in a row that I've been I'm privileged to host this event. So a huge thank you to the Global Fund for letting me do this. So today this is an Irish aid event run annually. Normally, for those of you who have been with us before, you would remember that we would be in the beautiful surroundings of Smock Alley. But of course, this is a very unusual year. But the good news is that we are still here, and we're still marking World AIDS Day, no matter what happens. So this has been organized by, it's run by Irish Aid, organized by the Irish Global Health Network. This is the 15th year to honor Father Michael Kelly, who of course is just to tell you a little bit more. I'm sure the man doesn't need any introductions at all, but I'll tell you a bit about Father Michael Kelly. For over 50 years, Tullamore-born professor Father Michael J. Kelly has worked tirelessly in the fight against HIV/AIDS in his naturalized country of Zambia, and internationally spreading the message of strength, dignity, and hope for those affected and at risk. And he's a renowned speaker, an advocate for HIV and AIDS, and has worked tirelessly to educate and promote safe behavior among youth and those most at risk in Zambia and throughout sub-Saharan Africa and much further afield. He has authored 15 books, and he's also worked as a consultant to the World Bank, UNESCO, UNICEF, the FAO, UniAIDS, Oxfam, Irish Aid, and many, many more. And he's also received many honors during his life, where he was recognized for his work when he was awarded an honorary degree by the University of College of Dublin in 2006 and the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. And he is honored for his work on HIV and AIDS by Minister of State at the Department of Foreign Trade. And he recently received the Order of Distinguished Service Award from President Lungu of Zambia in recognition for his contributions to the promotion of education, social justice, and HIV and AIDS. And amazingly, for the first time since I've had the pleasure of hosting this event, he's actually joining us. He is joining us from his home in Lusaka. So hello, Father Michael Kelly. Hope you can hear us loud and clear in Lusaka. And we're also joined by his family members, Darina, Mary, Pat, and all the gang. So you're all very welcome indeed. And this event is being live streamed as we speak through our YouTube and Facebook accounts, and also by the Gay Community News, the GCN. So for those of you who are with us today, we have 96 in the room. Brilliant. Can you please make sure that you tweet, Insta, do whatever you can to get this event trending. Please use the hashtag WAD 2020 or hashtag World AIDS Day. And the Twitter handles that you can use are Irish Aid, at If Global Health and Global Fund. So it's a 2-hour event. We have speeches, we have a panel, and we also have not one, but 2 choirs. It's going to be brilliant. So, okay, so that's really all I have to say. It's a huge pleasure for me to be hosting the event. And remember, the theme for this year's World AIDS Day is solidarity in the face of HIV at a time of global crisis. Because yes, the whole world is facing a common crisis, COVID-19, and we must make sure that we keep the topic and the issue of AIDS and HIV very much on the agenda, because it can very easily slip off the agenda, which I'm sure our speakers are going to speak about. So we need to make sure that we don't let that happen. And so keep those chats, keep those messages coming in relation to where you're joining us from. Okay, so moving on to our first speaker, which is the Minister Colin Brophy. If I can just very quickly say, Colin Brophy was appointed Minister of State with responsibility for overseas development aid and diaspora in 2020. Take it away, Minister.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome you to the 15th Professor Father Michael Kelly Lecture on HIV/AIDS to mark this year's World AIDS Day. This lecture series was established in 2006 by the Department of Foreign Affairs to honour and recognise the inspirational work of Father Michael Kelly. The events are intended to stimulate discussion and motivate action to address what is one of the most persistent public health and social challenges of our time. I'd like to begin by extending a very special thank you to the Irish Global Health Network for facilitating this event and to our inspiring speakers. I would also like to recognise and thank Father Michael Kelly, who will be addressing this event from his home in Zambia. Father Kelly, your tireless leadership, compassion and deep understanding of how to overcome HIV and AIDS has been transformational for the lives of many and inspirational to all of us. This year's lecture takes place against a backdrop that few may have anticipated. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in death, illness, economic hardship across the world. It's shown us how we can do more to build upon health and social care systems and to continue to reduce inequality. And it has truly brought into sharp focus the importance of collective action to address global health challenges. COVID-19 reminds us that we cannot lose sight of the fight against another virus, HIV and AIDS. In the midst of a pandemic, it's important that we recognise that while there has been real progress, the battle against HIV/AIDS is not over. The work that has happened over the last 30 years in improving the lives of people living with HIV and AIDS has given us access to important tools which the world is now using to combat COVID-19. It's also clear that people who are already vulnerable to HIV are most at risk in this pandemic and need particular attention. If we are to address the needs of people living with HIV and AIDS during this pandemic, global efforts must focus on doing more for specific groups, including those who face discrimination due to their sexual orientation, age, race, ethnicity, or disability. Our global journey in dealing with HIV/AIDS has taught us the importance of dealing with misinformation and addressing marginalisation and stigma, all too prevalent in our current pandemic. I, with my Irish Aid colleagues, am working to uphold the needs of the marginalised, the poor and the vulnerable, including those living with HIV, as health and other systems are challenged by COVID. As we invest in building back better public health systems from COVID-19, we must also keep the response focused on people. We must listen to the voices of communities who know what it means to live with HIV in their midst. We need a renewed focus on prevention, particularly for those most at risk, including adolescent girls, young women, gay men, commercial sex workers, conscious of their dignity and our shared humanity. Under my direction, Irish Aid will continue to play its important part in the HIV and AIDS response. I'm proud to have increased our support to the Global Fund by at least 50% between 2021 and 2023, and I'm committed to playing an active role in the fight against HIV/AIDS, both at a global level and on the work on the ground with our partners. Together, let us bring the epidemic of HIV/AIDS to an end. Before I hand back to our most capable moderator, Dill, I'd like to take the opportunity to wish you well in what I'm sure will be a fascinating and dynamic event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colin, for those inspiring words and for those opening remarks. Yes, indeed, exactly as I said, we are very much united in trying to keep the issue of HIV and AIDS very much on the agenda, and I think this is something that's going to be a common thread throughout our discussion this morning. Now, over to the man that we are here to indeed celebrate and honor for his work. We have a video that has been recorded by Professor Father Michael Kelly. So we're going to watch that now. This.
Please again. It's coming up. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. I was going to say rolling routine.
Good day to all of you, and greetings to everyone who is linking up with us for today's Irish Aid HIV lecture. That we cannot gather together for this annual event as we did in previous years, but must hold it online, can be laid squarely at the door of the global COVID pandemic. In many respects, this is a loss, since we will miss out on personal interaction with the speakers and with one another, not to mention the solidarity in the face of a common crisis that being physically together can generate. But it is again in the opportunity it gives to listen to speakers from different parts of the world. It is only because we are online that we can hear from Dr. Leah Tadesse, the Ethiopian Distinguished Minister of Health, and draw on her wealth of experience in healthcare leadership. Being online also enables us to hear from Saidi Brown, an HIV activist from South Africa who was herself born with HIV. The panelists today are Marieke Winrox, the Global Fund Chief of Staff from Switzerland, who has had extensive involvement in global health issues. And from nearer home, here in Ireland, we have Rory de Burka, the Director General of Irish Aid at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. This year, we also have the opportunity to experience the collaboration between two youth choirs, one from Africaid Zandiri in Zimbabwe, the other, the Speak Up, Sing Out, or Suso Choir from Ireland. Together, these will launch an extraordinary video of solidarity through music across the miles separating Zimbabwe and Ireland. These young people will surely lift our hearts today and give us a taste of how we can all unite in solidarity in face of HIV in a time of global crisis. None of this would have been possible were it not for the dedicated commitment of Nadine Ferris-France and her colleagues in the Irish Forum for Global Health, who originated most of the ideas for today's session and who toiled away for months to bring these ideas to fruition. Thanks to them, we can look forward to an instructive and enjoyable session, expertly moderated by Dil Vikramasinghe, social justice and mental health advocate, campaigner, journalist, and broadcaster. And we have already heard words of welcome from Minister of State Colin Brophy. Allow me to thank the Minister for his encouraging and supportive words and for the Irish Government's continued support for this annual event. That there is need for Ireland to continue to address the HIV/AIDS epidemic is shown by the increase in new Irish HIV infections, which are occurring at a rate higher than the European average. A very good reason, surely, for everybody throughout the country to show solidarity in face of the HIV epidemic. Our speakers today form an exciting and very well-informed team who will surely enlighten us on the HIV/AIDS situation in a world that is plagued with other major crises. Hopefully, when we have heard them speak, each one of us will feel stimulated to play a more energetic role in the global struggle against HIV, against COVID, and against the other crises that beset today's world. A few days ago, youth representatives in Cuba, in a tribute to Fidel Castro, stated that today's humans are experiencing an unprecedented multidimensional crisis. Let us briefly recall three of these dimensions, each a crisis that challenges us every day. First, there are the ongoing interlinked crises of environmental degradation and climate change, the single greatest threat facing humanity, as Mr. Simon Coveney, Taoiseach at that time, pointed out a year ago, and which together are leading steadily to a world characterised by numerous turbulent weather events, to a hotter planet and to a more hungry world. Then there is the continuing HIV and AIDS crisis, which has already killed 32 million people and left 75 million more infected, with the total number of new infections in 2019 being more than 3 times higher than the target of 500,000 that the world has set for itself. And finally, and as we are so well aware, there is the COVID crisis, which so far has seen more than 50 million infections and 1.25 million deaths. All of these are very severe crises closely interconnected with one another, each one increasing the potential of the others for disaster and human calamity, and each of them calling for the same response from every one of us as concerned human beings and inhabitants of this planet. All of them surely calling for each of us to speak out with one voice, no. Thus far you have come, but no further. You have reached your limit. All of them calling for colossal solidarity in face of the immensity of the evil and wrong that they represent. Recent extreme weather events highlight the damage we are doing to this beautiful world of ours by the way our factories, our industrial plant, our vehicles are flooding the atmosphere with carbon dioxide and other gases, thereby increasing global temperatures and speeding up the rate of climate change. Again, we acknowledge the ongoing crisis of HIV and AIDS. Most certainly and very gladly, we salute the great progressive strides that have been made over the 40 years since this disease first touched humanity. But at the same time, we note with alarm that in certain regions of the world, the epidemic is expanding, that nearly half the new HIV infections worldwide occur in people who inject drugs, men who have sex with men, sex workers and other key populations, and that these receive only a tiny part of the funding that goes into preventing and treating HIV infection. As we asserted 2 years ago at this annual HIV lecture, the policy and the strategy should be to leave no one behind. We reaffirm our commitment to that vision, pledging that each one of us will do what we can to make it a reality. And we cannot be blind, of course, to the COVID crisis that has killed and traumatized so many people, that has kept so many of us locked up in our homes for weeks on end, that has played havoc with our social lives, that has brought so many shops and small businesses close to ruin, and that has had such a chilling effect on democracy and the observance of human rights. Over and over again, we say no to this crisis, and we have shown our heroic solidarity in saying no by the way we have responded to the severe lockdown restrictions that almost imprisoned us in our homes a couple of times in the past year. These various crises, individually and in combination with one another, have the potential to bring the world to its knees, as indeed the COVID crisis has already shown. The COVID pandemic, climate change, and HIV occurrence are an unspeakably evil trio of catastrophes, each one increasing the risks from the other two. For instance, evidence from Lesotho shows that after periods of severe drought brought about by climate change, there is a rise in HIV infection rates, since getting the wherewithal to put food on the table becomes a higher priority than protecting oneself from HIV infection. Again, the World Health Organization has warned that because of COVID-related service disruptions, the supply of drugs for HIV prevention and treatment may be at risk, leading, among other things, to huge increases in new HIV infections among children. But there is one force that these global crises cannot withstand, and that is the force of our common determination not to let them bring us down. United we stand. It is an old expression, but one that is still full of powerful meaning. Let us stand together against these forces that are destroying our world. Let us together, by our words and actions, resist with all our might these death-dealing crises of AIDS, COVID, environmental destruction, and climate change. Let us cooperate to the full with those who are responding to HIV and AIDS, those who are dealing with various aspects of the COVID pandemic, those who are advocating for solidarity with all the actors for a cleaner and greener world. And let us show massive solidarity with all the actors in their struggle against HIV at this time when its impacts are being worsened by COVID, climate change, and environmental degradation. We are now coming closer to Christmas, the time of peace and goodwill across the world. Each one of the crises we have briefly considered works against such aspirations. Each one brings uncertainty, confusion, turmoil, and disruption into the lives of individuals and into the lives of communities. Let us do everything we possibly can to reduce their impact on our lives and on the people living in our communities and across the world. Let us bond ourselves together to show solidarity in face of the evil they represent. And may the words we will be hearing from today's presenters, as well as the inspiration from the joint youth choirs, strengthen all of us in our determination to do just that. Thank you, and may God bless and enlighten you, make you strong, and keep you safe against HIV, COVID, environmental destruction, and the harmful effects of climate change. Good day, and may God be with you.
Thank you very much for those words, Professor Father Michael Kelly. And can I just say, every year you're just getting younger. It's like 5 years, and the passion for the work is still so incredibly present, and it's an absolute privilege to just hear you speak. And your passion is very. I find it weird to say this word infectious, especially in this current situation at the moment, but it is incredibly inspiring. And there's 111 people today, and maybe you might put in your into the chat box what you hope to do in relation to keeping the issue of HIV and AIDS very much on the agenda, and keep it as part of the conversation, because it's a challenge at the moment, as with climate change and the COVID-19 and people struggling all over the world, how can we ensure that we keep the topic of HIV and AIDS very much at the forefront of people's conversation? So please use the chat box and tell us how you hope to do that in whatever field you're working in. Okay, so moving on to our next speaker, Dr. Leah Tadesse Gebremedin. I hope I got that right. Tadesse has a surname almost as complicated as mine. And she's the Minister of Health in Ethiopia. To tell you a little bit more about Tadesse, she became the Minister of Health at the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia in March 2020. She's an obstetrician and a gynecologist with extensive experience as a clinician in healthcare, leadership, academia, and hospital and program management with over 20 years of experience. Serving as the CEO and Vice Provost of St. Paul's Hospital Millennium Medical College in Addis Ababa for 7 years, Dr. Leah led the hospital services and academic reforms. Dr. Leah has also was also the project director of USAID's Maternal and Child Survival Program in Yepego, Ethiopia. And also her passion is strengthening and reforming health systems, and she has received recognition for her accomplishments and advocacy for gender equity in access to quality health services and training. So let's hear from Dr. Leah.
Your Excellency, Director General of Development Cooperation and Africa Division, Department of Foreign Affairs of Ireland, Your Excellency, Chief of Staff of the Global Fund, Your Excellency, Ambassador of Ireland to Ethiopia, my co-speakers and panelists at this event, whom I thank for your strength and advocacy, our wonderful musical performance of today's event, representatives of government, civil society, and other organizations present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to join you for this annual lecture in honor of Father Michael Kelly, a wonderful ambassador for Ireland in Zambia over many years, who has dedicated his life to working in solidarity with people living with HIV and AIDS. The theme, Solidarity in the Face of HIV at the Time of Global Crisis, is very timely for two reasons. First, HIV/AIDS remains a major cause of morbidity and mortality in Africa. In its UNAIDS 2020 data, UNAIDS reported that hundreds of thousands of people are dying each year of a disease that has multiple effective and relatively inexpensive treatment regimens available. Second, in our response to both HIV and COVID-19 pandemic, in Ethiopia, we have relied on solidarity to minimize the impact of the epidemic and this global pandemic, which is the same for the whole globe. In our COVID-19 response, different stakeholders came together in solidarity to minimize the direct and indirect impact of the pandemic on our society and economy. Community groups, government offices, different ministries at all levels of government, and the private sector worked together to respond to the pandemic collectively. Global solidarity and our partners played a crucial role in providing test kits, PPE, ventilators, and other supplies, and moreover, partners played a major role by establishing a humanitarian air hub in Addis Ababa in order to scale up procurement and distribution of PPE and medical supplies for the COVID response in Africa. Development partners also reprogrammed grants and availed emergency funds in the spirit of global solidarity. Today, we commemorate the 33rd World AIDS Day and pay tribute to the millions of people who have lost their lives and their loved ones due to HIV/AIDS, and those living with HIV in the backdrop of the unprecedented global pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has challenged and stretched health systems and disrupted the continuation and delivery of essential health services. In Ethiopia, as we work to minimize the impact of COVID-19 by instituting the COVID-19 preparedness and response teams, the Ministry of Health also established a non-COVID-19 team which focused on the delivery of essential health services and critical programs, which continue to deliver essential HIV prevention and treatment services as well. The Ministry of Health, in collaboration with stakeholders, was working hard to ensure there is no discontinuation of antiretroviral therapy by providing multi-month dispensing of ARTs, extending working hours, and doing phone follow-ups for missed appointments. Ethiopia's HIV response has achieved immense progress in containing the HIV epidemic and mitigating its impact on public health and human welfare. Our country, in collaboration with development partners, civil society organizations, and the community at large, has recorded tremendous results in the fight against the epidemic. To mention few, as of 2019, the number of new annual infections have been reduced by 46% from the 2010 baseline. The number of AIDS-related deaths have been decreased by 80% from the 2010 baseline. HIV prevalence is reduced to less than 1% from 3% baseline in the late 1990s. From all estimated people living with HIV, 79% know their status, and from all estimated people with HIV, 76% are on ART with 90.3% of viral load suppression. The country has also made significant progress in scaling up HIV testing and counseling services and improving HIV treatment access, driven by the exemption of HIV services from user fees in all public facilities and at community level. In addition, a policy of test and treat regardless of CD4 count was launched in 2017. As of 2018, there were more than 4,000 HIV testing and counseling sites, 1,500 antiretroviral therapy sites, and 3,000 PMCT sites across the country. Although this progress puts Ethiopia well on the way to achieving the UNAIDS 90-90-90 target, there are real concerns that the COVID-19 pandemic could disrupt service progress if we are not resilient. Stopping the COVID-19 epidemic has become a priority and an urgent public health crisis on the global political agenda, putting other health issues on the back burner, delaying programmatic targets. So now, more than ever, we need concerted efforts, particularly in identifying people living with HIV and scaling up innovative approaches such as SNS, pre-exposure prophylaxis, and HIV self-testing, and also ensuring that those on treatment are virally suppressed and can no longer transmit HIV. To achieve our goal of defeating AIDS, a public health threat by 2030, depends on how we respond to COVID-19. We must unite diverse stakeholders with agreed upon milestones for success, earn the trust of the public through consistent, accurate messaging, mobilize essential financing, and rapidly adapt systems to respond to new and evolving challenges and undertake strategic and result-driven planning. In Africa, 60% of the response to HIV/AIDS is mobilized from outside partners, and 80% of our medicine is imported. And there has been steady reductions in external financing for the HIV program, which threatens the continuation of critical activities. In Ethiopia, we are working to raise both external and domestic resources to ensure the continuation of HIV services in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have developed a domestic resource mobilization strategy that aligns with the HIV/AIDS National Strategic Plan to ensure the sustainability of the HIV response. However, to achieve these ambitious goals, Ethiopia recognizes a continuing need for solidarity to its HIV response and to safeguard uninterrupted supply of essential medicine and services to respond to HIV. As this year's World AIDS Day theme calls, and as we enter the last decade of action to end AIDS as a public health threat by 2030, we need solidarity to sustain the hard-won gains and achieve the vision of ending the AIDS epidemic. As we review progress and setbacks, we make a call for increased engagement and support from donors, development partners, civic societies, the private sector, the communities, and at last but most importantly, our frontline health workers to work together to achieve gender equity, access to adequate health care, and ensure continuity of essential health services in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. In conclusion, COVID-19 pandemic has shown us how interconnected and interdependent our world is, and how only by working together we are able to tackle the pandemic and stop HIV/AIDS from further affecting our populations. I am confident that with solidarity, we will eliminate both HIV/AIDS and COVID-19 from our world while building resilient health systems, ensuring our most vulnerable populations have adequate access to quality, life-saving health care. Together, we will build a better world. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much for those amazing words, Dr. Leah Tedessi Gebre Medin, Minister of Health in Ethiopia. Yes, certainly, that's a very good point. You know, the world has come together in relation to, you know, we've been forced to face our interconnectivity because of COVID-19. And there's a lot of lessons, I think, that we are currently learning. That if we can all unite for COVID-19, why can't we all unite for other issues, indeed, such as HIV and AIDS? Okay, so moving on to our next speaker, I'm very, very excited to introduce Sadie Brown, who is joining us live. She's joining us live from Ejose in South Africa. So Sadie is a 24-year-old young woman born with HIV, and she found out at 14 about her status and started publicly disclosing at the age of 18. Wow. She's used her status to educate other people about HIV using social media. She's been very active in her advocacy. She was part of a youth plenary at the 8th South African AIDS Conference in Durban in 2017 and opened up the conference with a piece she wrote back when she was 18 titled An Open Letter to HIV. So she works with various NGOs and she's a psychology student at the Northwest University, and she's part of the NWU Students Advocating Leadership and Transformation. And she recently started a YouTube channel as she uses to further educate and enlighten people about HIV. And she's made it, she has made it on the prestigious Mail and Guardian of 200 Young South Africans of the year of 2018. And her everyday goal is to try to show those who feel hopeless that there can be life after a HIV diagnosis. I mean, she's amazing. Sadie, how are you? Take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm good, thank you. Good day, everyone. Greetings to Father Michael Kelly and his family, to my fellow speakers, organizers of this prestigious event, and to everyone attending. Thank you so much. So my name is Sadie Brown. I am a 25-year-old young person living with HIV. I was born with the virus, and I found out at the age of 14. I basically found out at a school trip, and I didn't even get the pre-test counseling. I think that is literally what kind of determined how my entire journey with HIV turned out, because I'm a huge believer in that everything that you go through as a person living with HIV, especially in the beginning stages of you finding out about your HIV status, pretty much determine how you turn out. So I didn't receive any pre-test counseling. I remember just being asked my name, my surname, my age, and that was it. I was just asked those 3 questions and we went on with the test. Now, as a 14-year-old, because I was not dating yet, I was not really doing anything. I was really naive in thinking that there was no way I was going to test positive for HIV. So I had that HIV test for the sake of just making memories, for the sake of just sounding smart and just going back home and saying I had an HIV test. And unfortunately, that is just how I got to find out about my HIV status. So as a teenager who was living with HIV, because I still had to now tackle my teens as a young person living with HIV, I still had to come back home from that trip. And I remember wanting to get home and just tell my aunt, because by then my parents were already late. So I was pretty much living with my aunt. I couldn't wait to get home. I couldn't wait to just tell her. And on my way home, I kept on thinking she is probably going to ask where I got this thing from. And because I didn't know where I got this HIV from, I was just like, I mean, it's going to seem quite wrong if I say I don't even know where I got it from. So I kept it to myself for quite some time. I ended up keeping my status to myself for about 6 months. So about a week or 2 weeks later, after that trip, I joined the local drama club. And at least with that schedule, I was a bit busy because I'd go to school. After school, I would definitely go to the drama rehearsals. And then I'd get back quite late in the evening, do my schoolwork and sleep. So for the next 5 months or so, I didn't really have time to think about HIV or AIDS or TB. So this is how I used that schedule, and it helped me for the 5 months until now, because this thing happened around June 2009. So until now in December the year, because we all know that December is AIDS Awareness Month, now we had to start making playing those monologues about HIV and AIDS, and the way my co-actors at the drama group were just portraying HIV really, and because I was keeping this dark myself as old, I would be like, but that's not how you like always opposing everything that everyone was saying. And it got to a point where now I started feeling like I need to tell some, because I feel like it's starting to show. I then forced myself to tell my teacher. I remember I procrastinated so long until I literally sent her as a thing, I need to see you tomorrow. She probably thought it was like from studies or something. I got I tested positive for HIV 6 months old. I'm scared. I'm really scared. And I genuinely did not understand where I got this thing from. The one who then brought me home, and we got to my aunt. We both told her, and she's the one who said, "Listen, I knew about your parents. I didn't know that you couldn't or your sins." Then we went to the clinic for a screening because my results still came back positive. And then so sorry for that. And then from then on now, I started getting to that whole feeling of denial. I actually pushed HIV status to the back of my mind. I stopped thinking about it. We all knew here at home that I had tested positive for HIV. I'm the only one from 4 siblings who tested positive for HIV because I'm the last born. And we just stopped talking about it, and it became like an open secret where everyone knew, but no one was saying anything about it. Right until 4 years later now, at the age of 18, my health had started deteriorating. And I went to the clinic because I had started getting sores around my chest and up to my neck, and they eventually got to my face. So as an 18-year-old, I was a bit older. I was starting to date. So of course I wanted to like look pretty, and I was just like, listen, I'm just gonna go to the clinic and get an ointment that will make these things disappear. Not once did I even think that it could have anything to do with my HIV status, because I was that deep in denial. I got there, and the nurses were the ones who said, listen, you know that you came here 4 years ago with your aunt. You know there's positive for HIV. Your health has deteriorated and you need to get on treatment. Now, all this time, my view of HIV, also because of the way that it was structured in schools and the way that the media has always pushed this narrative of HIV, I grew up feeling like living with HIV meant that you get diagnosed, you spend the rest of your life on these pills that are meant to make you feel better, but they will also make you sick because of the side effects, and eventually you die. So I was really scared of also getting on treatment because I was scared of getting sick. I was scared of the side effects of these pills. I remember even going on the internet and searching side effects of ARVs, and that was when I found out that I don't even know which page I landed on, but I landed on this page that said your hair is going to fall off, your teeth are going to fall off. And I was so scared. I remember crying and just feeling like, but I'm just 18. And I genuinely felt like all these pills were going to do were to make me feel ashamed for living with HIV. I went back to the clinic and I said, I have information. I read everything on Google, so please don't lie to me. I was also going through a phase where I felt so betrayed by my parents. I felt like my siblings couldn't relate to me and I couldn't relate to them because they were all HIV negative, and I just felt like the odd one out in the family. So when I went back to the clinic, I genuinely thought she was just going to that lady who was giving me counseling for my medication. I felt like she was just going to lie to me just to trick me to getting on treatment. So I got there and I said, I read everything on Google. Don't lie to me. I read everything. I know I have all the information. I just need you to confirm it. And she said, listen, let me do my job firstly. And and she started saying, listen, Of course, these pills have side effects, but they are not as drastic as Google or this page that you landed on is making them out to be. So please just try them out. And I was so brave and I was so angry, and I just felt like, listen, I am giving these pills 1 month, and if I don't start seeing any better conditions, I am never coming back. Needless to say, it's been 7 months, it's been 7 years, and I am still on treatment with a suppressed viral load. So living with HIV as a person who is now in my, because now I'm in my 20s, has been quite a meaningful and beautiful journey for me as an HIV activist, because now from the age of 18, because I started writing a lot, my friends had suggested that I go for counseling. I was so angry and I felt like I don't want to speak to anyone who gets paid to listen to me. So I didn't even want to go for counseling, but I knew that I needed to release in some way or the other. So I resorted to writing, and that was how I ended up writing that open letter to HIV that I shared on Facebook. I come from a really remote township in South Africa. I knew that I wanted to publicly disclose, but because I live so far from everything, literally my only option of being that public and that loud about my HIV status was social media. So I went on Facebook one day. I'm also a very impulsive person. So I went on Facebook one day and I just decided to post my open letter to HIV, and I started sharing my journey. And in the beginning, I just did that for my own personal healing. But I started cultivating a community and a following of people who were also living with HIV. I was 18 years old and I had people who were older than me who would come into my messages and tell me their own issues. So even when I had found healing and I felt like I'm okay, I think I should maybe stop posting, I couldn't really stop, because now it stopped being just about me, but being about this entire community that really followed me and would continuously come onto my messages and tell me about their challenges as people living with HIV. So that is how I started being an HIV activist. And I'm very passionate about speaking up on women who are living with HIV, on queer women who are living with HIV, because I do believe that they are constantly being erased in these conversations about HIV. We do get told that the risk of infection is low, but in actual fact, in as much as it is low, it is quite unfair to completely erase queer women from the conversations about HIV. It is also quite unfair, because if you're going to do that, then that also means that you are completely disregarding trans women who are living with HIV. So I'm a huge believer that if we come together and stand in solidarity with people who are living with HIV and familiarize ourselves with the struggles of people who are living with HIV, then we would have won this fight against HIV as the human race. Thank you so much.
Oh my God. Sadie for president. I am speechless. You're amazing. You're 25. You're 25, and your wisdom and loads of messages of support here from our participants. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You're inspiring, Sadie. Such bravery and heroism. You're an example to us all. Yeah, just absolutely. Like if you were here, I don't know, would I be able to practice social distancing, because I just want to give you the biggest hug, because you're just an incredible human being. And yeah, thank you so much. You're just amazing. All right, Sadie. Wow, amazing. This is great. I love being the moderator for this event on an annual basis, because it's such a just a source of just positivity. And I suppose in relation to, it really helps us reaffirm our commitment to ensuring that we keep the fight in relation to HIV and AIDS, because there's the face, of HIV. And thank you so much for being brave to lend your beautiful face to the issue, because sometimes people just need to see a human being who's impacted by the issue to spark in them I suppose the desire to do better. We know better. We know you. We got to do better for you and for all the people that you represent. Okay, moving on now. Just on that beautiful warm and fuzzy moment, we are going to now inject some music into this. So there'll be, if you are not crying now, you're definitely going to be crying after this, okay? Because you're going to be moved. So I'm going to just introduce not one, but two choirs who have worked together to create what we were about to watch. So first of all, Jandiri Youth Choir is a group of young people living in Harare, Zimbabwe. All the members share two things in common. Firstly, they have all been deeply affected by HIV in their lives, either living with HIV themselves or having lost loved ones to HIV. Secondly, they all share a deep commitment to using the creative arts to share their life experiences, to advocate for the needs of young people living with HIV, and to challenge the way society thinks and feels about HIV. They have produced a variety of powerful songs and a video over the years, which have been shared and loved worldwide. They feel immensely excited and privileged to have had this opportunity to collaborate with Suso Choir in this cultural exchange in commemoration of World AIDS Day, and directed by the wonderful Sungi and Nicola for this collaboration. Now, the other choir is Suso Youth Choir, which is directed by Emer and Claire Keehan. They're made up of 20 young people aged between 16 and 19. They rehearse once a week and perform regularly at all sorts of events, including their own concerts, local fundraisers, national festivals, and prestigious events. They performed for us last year at this very event, and in the past, they have raised lots of money and awareness for Pieta House, were awarded gold at the Prague Young Bohemia Festival, and have played the main stage at Fantastical Music Festival twice. These young people are really invested in culture, awareness, personal development, and inclusion, and are delighted to be part of this event again this year. So both choirs hope you enjoy their singing, their joy, and their presence, and singing a really special song for us. They're performing Choose to Dance, an original song by Suso choir director and musician Emer Crehan. Get the tissues, you'll need it.
This project is about World AIDS Day. Yes, 2020 have been a tough year with COVID-19 lockdown, but that won't stop us from commemorating 1 December, showcasing our resilience as young people and aid of the ending of HIV pandemic. And what better way to join our peers from Ireland, because together we stand strong. This project have benefited us in giving us confidence on how to take our medication and how to surpass situations which are tough, and how to deal with main problems of the mind. Now that we have got support, we will take our medication consistently with support, and being resilient is our motto. My word to everyone who is listening and the young people is to continue taking your medication, continue to be resilient. With support, we stand strong. Nothing is for us without us. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Alana, I'm 18 years old and I am from the Suso Youth Choir here in Ireland. We are so excited that we got to participate in this collaboration with Svendiri Youth Choir in Zimbabwe, and we've just learned so much from them. This collaboration allowed the Irish choir and the Svendiri choir to collaborate on a wonderful song that just really highlights the true meaning of life and living life with joy and happiness and gratitude. So that was really amazing. We had weekly Zoom calls where we would rehearse and just get to relax and have fun and make new friends and learn about each other's cultures, and that was really, really great. We even got to learn a verse of our song in Shona last week, which was really cool. These past few weeks have just been so inspiring and eye-opening. As many of you know, with COVID, it's so easy to get caught up in our own lives and what we're doing, but this exchange just really allowed me to sit back and just appreciate everything I have in my own life. During this exchange, I have just made so many new friends and so many really strong connections, and just people, I've met so many people that just really understand what it is to live life and live life with music and to celebrate with music. So it's been really amazing and I have loved every minute of it. Thank you. Tatenda, Gerv Malgut. Bye.
Sticks and stones won't break my bones, make me better. You cannot be limited by anything. Imagine we are now doing a song with we are very far from each other, and yet we managed to do something great like this.
Technically, it's just light and sound that's coming out of this thing. It actually just feels like actual love and happiness.
Understand that it's always mi amor for life. Trust me, I now understand that I've got a reason to live, and now this project has been the best for me.
Because of Corona, but at the end, we found out the way, and I'm so happy. So memories shall never end, and love of God shall never end.
That it really does like lift our spirits, since this is a tough time, or like some Gano taught me is Mauen, Mauen times. And it's so lovely to learn the other language, like to learn Shona. And it's such a beautiful language to learn and to sing.
Later.
Learn to see in the dark. Open your heart. What do you stand for? If you don't know what you stand for, how can I find you? Choose the rules of the game. Things will never be the same. I'm so glad to know your name.
You can start with your heart, where you're at. Can't you feel this connection?
We are all the way we are. We are all the way we Life is much better when we dance together. When we move with grace, when we take a chance. So take some time, learn to shine, make a choice, hear your voice. To choose before you speak, think before you speak, word is word.
There's a room and a place, so much more you have to taste. Let it happen.
I miss the days and lost the time. You forgot that you were fine. So many questions.
All you need, the answers meet. The spices left beneath the tears. Can you feel them?
We are all the way we are. We are all the way we Life is much better when we dance together.
Mi amor, tu lei
They end up being done by someone.
Amazing. Amazing. Absolutely beautiful. Not a dry eye in the house, I am sure. So that was the Jandiri Youth Choir in collaboration with Suso Choir, directed by Emer and Claire Cahan. And just to let you know, that song, Choose to Dance, is an original song by the Suso Choir director and musician Emer Crahan. So thank you so much. This is just so special. So very special. I mean, we get to see that video again at the end of the event because you're just so good. You know, it's just so good. We want to watch it again. Okay, so moving on to our panel discussion. I have the pleasure to welcome again Sadie Brown, who will be joining us for the panel discussion. But we're also joined by two other panelists. We have Marike Winrocks, I hope I've got that right, joining us from Geneva. So Marika became Chief of Staff at the Global Fund in 2013, from June 2017 through to February 2018, and she served as Interim Executive Director. Her distinguished career includes more than 30 years of experience in global health and development, serving in government at the United Nations and in civil society, and is working in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Europe. You're very welcome, Marike.
Thank you. I've been struggling with my headphones. Does my microphone work like this?
Yes, yeah, it's sounding really good. Sounding really good. Can you hear us?
Really? Yeah, no, absolutely. I was afraid it wouldn't work.
Very good. So we have also a third panelist, and that is Rory de Burka, who, of course, is no stranger to these events, to this event anyway, has spoken at this event a number of occasions. So Rory leads the division charged with managing the Irish Aid Development Cooperation Programme since 2017. In this capacity, he advises on the most effective and efficient policy options for the delivery of Ireland's international development goals, including humanitarian aid. He represents Irish positions on development matters in international fora, including the EU and the UN. He formerly held the position of Ambassador of Ireland in Mozambique and has been a strong advocate and supporter on HIV for many years. Rory, where are you? Are you here?
I'm here, yeah. Thank you, Dill.
You are. And you're joining us from Dublin.
Absolutely.
Yes, very good. Okay, so you're all very welcome to a panel discussion. We have a good, strong, 45 minutes, which is great. So if I can ask you all to maybe take 5 minutes to just respond to World AIDS Day being today, and obviously in the face of the time of global crisis. What are your thoughts? Marike, if I can go to you perhaps first.
I think a little bit of a mixed feeling. It's I know we have a lot still to work for. I think we all know that all the barriers we still have to face. But I think just looking back, it's with an immense feeling of gratitude and pride. I've been involved in the fight against AIDS sort of really very intensely over the last 20 years. And I started when I was working with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and where we were only focusing on prevention because we thought the treatment could not be made available. I remember when we had the first United Nations special session on HIV, their access to a treatment hardly made it to the outcome declaration because everyone thought that treatment could not be made available in a sustainable way in low and middle income countries. And just looking back at what has been achieved over the last 20 years, where people like Sadie is strong, healthy, important activist, contributing so much to her society, and thanks to all the work of everyone, civil society, the advocates, all the UN agencies, the funders, the donors, it's immense achievement. So I think just looking back, I think it's the gratitude and this immense feeling of gratitude to everyone who has contributed, to the amazing activists like Sadie who have made it possible that collectively we could just turn the tide.
Thank you, Marika. Thank you. And what about yourself, Rory? how have you been, and what were your thoughts in relation to today and keeping the topic of HIV and AIDS very much at the forefront of people's minds despite facing a global crisis?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, before I say anything else, I just want to say, wow, Sadie, fantastic, you know, and it takes great courage still to come out and tell a story so personal. And I think it's something that really resonated with me, because I think here in Ireland, we've learned the power of personal testimony over the last few years in a slightly different context, but not unrelated. Because I think our referendums in the last few years, particularly the equal marriage referendum, was the continuation. Yes, Dill, I know you were a particular activist, but I think that journey around a different type of society that we've had here, in part owes its origins to the personal testimony and the change agenda and the leadership of individuals before society caught up. You know, that grew out of the AIDS epidemic that we experienced in the 1980s, and an epidemic that's still continuing today in many parts of the world. And as Father Michael reminded us, you know, in Ireland we can't be complacent, because unfortunately the incidence is still going up. And we've had a lot of bad news, I think, globally this year. I mean, 2020 is to everybody what 2018 was to celebrities, perhaps. But you know, there is some good news as well, and let's not forget that, particularly around HIV. You know, in Africa, you know, incidence of HIV is down 38% since 2010. I think that's something we need to really celebrate. Yesterday, the WHO gave pre-qualification to something really important, which is called a adapnovirus vaginal ring. This is something that a number of agencies, including Ireland, the Dutch as well, Marika will probably know about this, and others have been working on for a very long time, but it gives women, vulnerable women, control over their own fertility in a way that also protects them from HIV. Really, really important. Because I think one of the things that's characterized our journey with HIV over the last 30 years has been understanding inequalities and power dynamics around HIV. And I think, you know, we're not there. And we see some challenges, particularly in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, where infections are increasing hugely, and that relates to power and inequalities. And the other thing that I think we need to reflect on is the importance of leadership. I talked a little bit about personal leadership a second ago, but also good political leadership. And I think it's been interesting to contrast the leadership question around how the world is responding to COVID-19 and how political leadership maybe didn't respond quickly enough around HIV. And while arguably leadership maybe hasn't been all we'd like on COVID, it's been much better and much faster. And it's lent in on the science, the good science that the battle against HIV and the therapeutics and some of the science that maybe hasn't delivered us a HIV vaccine yet, but it's lent in on that. And the last thing I'll say, and that's good, that is relatively good news, is one of the lessons that I think we've taken from HIV is the linkage between fighting any virus and really good, strong public health systems. While in large parts of the world, public health systems aren't strong enough yet, they are better than they were, partly leaning in on the battle against HIV. And I think that gives us hope moving forward that we need to invest globally in stronger public health systems and linking as best we can our efforts to contain and mitigate HIV, and also to contain and mitigate and hopefully eliminate COVID as we get, as we move on the sort of, on the decade that we set for ourselves against to eliminate HIV and AIDS by 2030. Maybe the hill is a little bit steeper than we anticipated when we agreed the Sustainable Development Goals and we agreed that particular target. But I think, there's enough there. The ingredients are in the pot. I think we have to put the effort behind it and make sure that we get there. So I think there's good news and there's some warning signs as well. But I think we can get there. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Dil.
Thank you, Rory. We love good news. God knows we need some. So thank you for that, Rory. Sadie, would you like to respond before because we actually have questions from Father Michael Kelly. Actually, I thought this is great. It's the first time we actually have questions from him. So before we go to those questions, Sadie, would you like to respond?
Thank you so much for the question. I think, as my fellow panelists have just mentioned, I think it's important to recognize where we come from, to recognize where we currently are, and to just say we have put in the work. Of course, there is still so much work that we still need to do, that still needs to be done. One thing that COVID showed all of us, globally, all as a mistake, life is such a fickle thing, and we need to constantly be there for one another. If there's one thing that COVID did for the human beings, as literally show us how unequal we are as society. It literally, like, people were literally losing jobs. We were locked down in South Africa for over 3 months. People were losing jobs. Companies were closing down. It really did way too much damage. And in as much as I'm appreciative of just how our government has been able to help us and meet us halfway, some of the things that really everyone went through are really irreversible. And I am quite grateful that we are still here. I am grateful at the fact that we did try our best with the little that we could have and with the little that we have. And I'm just hopeful that in future we can be a bit more ready if something like this ever, hopefully not, but if something like this ever happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadie. Thank you. Very, very wise words. Now, for our participants, if you have any questions to the panelists, please put them in the chat box, and we'll be happy to pose them to the panelists. Okay, so a question from Father Michael Kelly. Here we go. So we are very much aware of the way the COVID crisis has brought our world to its knees and impacted on the delivery of HIV services. Should we not also be paying attention to the global debt crisis? We are told that the global debt burden has surged by over $15 trillion since 2019, largely because of the COVID pandemic, and is expected to rise by the end of this year to $277 trillion, the equivalent of 365% of the global GDP. Here in Zambia, we are conscious of our debt burden, especially in the light of our recent failure to meet our international obligations and commitments, while Kenya seems to be heading in the same direction. Has COVID worsened countries' debt burden? What bearing does this mammoth crisis, which is strangling development, have on the response to HIV and indeed on the response to COVID? So I'm going to post this to all three of you. Who would like to go first? Can I just say, I'm not envious of being in your seat right now. So who would like to go? Yeah,
maybe I'll go first. Look, I think Father Michael poses one of the big questions that it's going to take probably a while to unravel globally. I suppose the first thing to say is COVID has given us the world a global shock, and it's unfortunately, like all viruses, it's evil genius is it reveals all of the global weaknesses, including around debt. And Zambia is one of the countries most exposed on debt. It also reveals weaknesses in leadership, weaknesses across a whole host of other things as well. And I think what it's doing is it's challenging the world to a crisis, or sorry, to use its imagination to respond creatively to global debt. Now, we did this before, around 2005, when we had a global effort around developing countries' debt. It's going to be difficult because not all of the debt is held by the same people. So you have debt held by Western countries, you've got debt held by private creditors, and you've got debt held by lenders from countries that weren't really in that debt space 15 years ago. And unpicking all of that's quite challenging. There are countries that weren't part of that discussion 15 years ago, like small island developing states that are middle income, who have big challenges, and the macroeconomic climate is difficult. So there are lots of really technical discussions taking place. It's mixed up with great power politics. And I think the real challenge is to make sure while that works its way through, and it has to work its way through, and I think the need to do something about debt will mean we get a resolution. It's how quickly we get there, I think, is the question. On what the terms will be, I think there's a lot of negotiation and a lot of hard work going to go on, and it's really technical and complicated stuff. I think the real challenge is while that elite level conversation is taking place, that we still focus on the needs of people on the ground, and the people in debtor countries who probably aren't, in many cases, wealthy at all, who've never had the benefit of the borrowed money, remain just as poor, if not poorer, just as vulnerable to infections as they did. And that's where I think it's really important that relatively wealthy countries like Ireland, we mightn't feel as wealthy at the end of 2020 as we did when we started, but we're still a lot wealthier, than most countries in the world, that we continue to engage with organizations like the Global Fund that Marika represents, to make sure that when it comes to pandemia, that we're responding not just to COVID, but also investing in, the public health systems, so that we start to eliminate the virus, which ultimately is the cause of some of those economic and social shocks that feed back into countries' ability to pay back their debts. So there's a need to tackle the debt crisis, but also those economic and social crises that flow from having a pandemic that also needs a resolution. So it's complicated. People are working on it. I think it's right to be impatient, but also when things are really complicated, you have to try and unpick them. And I said it's technically complicated, it's politically complicated, and it's financially complicated. So we have to be somewhat patient, unfortunately.
Marika, what are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. And let me say how happy I was that the real expert went first. And also, it was really lovely. I hadn't heard Father Kelly for quite a while, and it's amazing to see Father Kelly, to hear him speak, and to see how passionate he still is. So I'm definitely not an expert. I'm not an economist. I'm a medical doctor. The Global Fund is, we're not in debt relief issues, and we don't contribute to that because our funding is in the form of grants. But it's a hugely important issue and very concerning for the long-term impact. And we very much welcome that the recent G20 meeting suspended debt repayment until summer next year for 73 particularly heavily indebted countries. And I know that the IMF and the World Bank are supporting countries, but still we really fear that the poorest countries will suffer the hardest from socioeconomic impacts of this crisis. And we've seen, I think, in all of our countries, in Europe, in the United States, where governments have basically violated all their fiscal policies to support the country. And we've seen that a lot of the poorest countries that are heavily affected by lockdowns and have huge impact on their economies and their societies, that they will not have the same means, and actually the COVID crisis will further add to their debt crisis. And we're particularly concerned about some countries in sub-Saharan Africa, like Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola, which are some of the largest economies, but are also heavily dependent on revenues from oil and other extractive industries. So they will be really suffering very hard. We are a lot, if you look at the Global Fund, the replenishment, we asked increases from donors, and Ireland was among the countries that really responded to that. But we had even more ambitious ask from the implementing countries themselves in terms of increased domestic commitments. And a lot of countries committed to increasing more in health, and that was October of last year. And 12 months later, we are in a pretty different situations in many countries, and we fear that increasing pressure on the public resources will lead to a decline in health budget allocations over the coming years in many countries. And every country will have to face very tough choices. And I know that governments in high-income countries, they have to see how they balance and how they're going to eventually pay back. But it's for low-income countries, low and middle-income countries, those choices and the priorities they have to the difficult choices that they have to make are even more complex because they have so much impact on human lives. So we will be following very closely what's happening and also see how we are working with other funders, with, well, obviously with the countries themselves, but also with other funders and with the World Bank, with the IMF on how can we collectively try to avoid a really public health disaster and a social disaster in many societies.
For the participants who are watching this, please do help us get this event trending. Use the Twitter handle Irish Aid, If Global Health, and Global Fund. And don't forget the hashtags WAD 2020 and World AIDS Day. Sadie, you were talking about how South Africa, speaking of economy, I mean, on the ground, what's it like now in South Africa? There's still businesses closing, people still losing their jobs. Give us an idea of how the situation is where you are.
Okay. So about a month ago, the president of the country opened up the country. So so all the regulations have been eased up and people have been able to go back to work. But as I mentioned earlier on, things like companies closing down are literally irreversible things that no amount of okay, you guys can go back to work can reverse the damage that already has been put on the businesses here in South Africa. Things are honestly bad on the economic side of things. South Africa is one of the countries, and we live in so much poverty. Yeah. People don't have jobs already. People don't have jobs. People didn't even have jobs before the corona outbreak. So you can imagine how bad things are right now. I do believe that it is important that we just keep on speaking so highly about the importance of solidarity. And in as much as today we are speaking about solidarity, I feel like it should just be the theme for ever. Actually, it would be quite important to see other high-income countries coming together and to help other countries. I would like to see that happen because honestly, the damage is here, and the only way we can all move forward as the entire globe would be if we all came together and if we all stood in solidarity and practiced empathy to those who are not as privileged as we are. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Sadie, I can hear you're studying psychology, all right, because you mentioned empathy. I'm in my third year training as a psychotherapist, so it's like a 4-year degree of how to show empathy. If only we could send everyone to college to know how to show that to people, because the big difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is like, oh, that's too bad for you. All right, bye. Yeah. But empathy is like, I see your pain. What can I do to help? So thank you for that, Sadie. Another question here from Father Michael, and this is around stigma, of course, because you can't talk about HIV or AIDS without talking about stigma, because it's. I know it's 2020, but unfortunately, stigma is still there. Because it's still in Ireland today. I've still yet to meet someone who will say to me, "Oh yeah, I'm HIV positive," as if I think people are just barely now able to say that they are COVID-19 positive, and I find people are very, very careful about saying that. So you can just imagine just how much more the stigma is around being, and still, I still have to meet a straight white woman in Ireland who will also be open about her status. Because it's always, whenever we hear about HIV and AIDS in Ireland, it's always a male and it's usually gay, which it just completely reinforces the wrong stereotype, and it's just more misinformation for people. So the response to HIV and AIDS has been bedeviled by the specter of stigma. These are Father Michael's words, treating it as a hushed up topic that one shouldn't talk about, except in quasi-academic meetings such as this, let alone admit that one is positive. The same anxiety, fear, uncertainty, shame, treating it as a mark of disgrace or as a reproach has also appeared in relation to COVID, exactly as I said. What concrete steps can be taken to deal with this stigma monster? What can those participating online in this program do to lessen or even wipe out the stigma associated with HIV, AIDS, and COVID? Now, I didn't read that question. I feel like already Father Michael and I are on the same wavelength. What do you think? Yeah, who would like to go first? Go on, Marika.
Thank you very much. Let me go first on this one. And I really want to pick up first on Sadie's point on empathy, because I think we can talk about stigma and discrimination as something that other people should do. But I think first and foremost, it's about all of us and all of our individual responsibilities in our common humanity. And if I've taken one message from the sort of the introduction session with the choir and Sadie speaking and Father Kelly and the Irish minister, it's that we're all human and we should treat other people like we would like to be treated ourselves, and not be judgmental, and try to be respectful of people of all walks of life, and make sure you're well informed. And I know there's Sadie also, she gave the sort of some examples how if you just keep yourself well informed by just Googling everything, it might not always be the best information, but just make sure you get the right information, because I think that much of stigma and discrimination is really based on fear and misconceptions. But apart from the individual, which I think is really important, we also must recognize that some countries have legal frameworks that basically institutionalize stigma and discrimination, and that has become a real barrier for fighting HIV. And we also know if you want to end AIDS by 2030, we must continue to tackle those barriers to access, whether they be human rights related, gender inequality, gender-based violence, and the laws and policies that basically, as I said, institutionalize this stigma and discrimination. And those laws, they criminalize key populations such as gay men and other men who have sex with men, transgender people, sex worker, people who use drugs, and all other groups who are vulnerable. So only if we try to remove those barriers to access to services and work with the communities and strengthen community systems and responses, we will be able to reach the people who are most vulnerable and most affected. For the Global Fund, we have a really cool program to reduce human rights barriers to HIV services. And that's not only because we think it's a nice thing to do, but it's crucial to increase the effectiveness of our Global Fund grants. And they make sure that they help to ensure that health services reach those people who are most affected and most vulnerable. What the initiative, it's now we've started in 20 countries where we are providing very intense support to help the country identify what are the key human rights related barriers to access, what needs to be done to address those barriers, what's already in place, and what's the plan for addressing the remaining barriers, and how much will it cost, and how will that be funded? And initially when we started, we thought it would be, the uptake would be mostly by civil society organizations who would really push this agenda. But we've been really pleased to see that in a lot of countries, it was actually also governments to realize that they will not be able to achieve their targets and commitments if they don't very critically look at their own laws and policies and what barriers exist and how they can address them. So we have in, I think now all 20 countries, they've had multi-stakeholder meetings where they discussed with all the people in country, the government, civil society, activists, communities, other the external stakeholders, to really together formulate a plan to address those barriers to access. And I think that's, so we will be monitoring. We also will be monitoring impact, which I think is the first time that will be done at such a large scale, and not just looking at the programs that will be implemented, but also in how we can translate that into better services and better health impact. And so we'll keep you posted. I'm terribly excited about it. And I think, I really hope that it will contribute to reducing stigma and discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sadie, talk to me about stigma in South Africa. I mean, we heard your story, how, you know, from the age of 14 to 18, you didn't really talk about it. Nobody, it became like, you said, like an open secret. So what's it like now, now that you're as a 25-year-old, can you see some change in the right direction?
Well, for me, I don't really experience a lot of external stigma. Even in the beginning of my journey with disclosing public, the main stigma that I suffered from the most was the internal. I remember when I started disclosing publicly, I remember because I was literally the first person where I come from to come out and say I'm living with HIV at 18. And because I was so young, a lot of people just felt like, why are you doing this? Are you looking for attention? What is happening, right? That was stigma, because it was like, how dare she think she can start doing this when we've been living all these years without saying anything about anything really. But the reason I wanted to speak so loudly about my HIV status and about my journey was because for the most time, I genuinely thought I was the only person here who was living with HIV. I remember even thinking that if I had to start getting on treatment, we would need to like apply and get those pills here. So when I saw how accessible they were, that was when it dawned on me that actually it means that people are here and they come here to get these pills, but no one is saying anything about this. Why? So that is the only reason I started saying, actually, I am living with HIV and I'm okay with it. Of course, there were a lot of people who just felt like, why are you doing this? I still find people now online who just be like, stop, we get it. We understand now. We know you're actually positive, but like, stop. But I cannot stop when people still get infected with HIV. I cannot stop when they still get that uncomfortable with me repeatedly saying I am Sadie and I'm living with HIV. I also have people who say I lie because I get paid to trick people into getting on treatment. And I'm like, that's all stigma. It's because you guys think that it is such an impossible thing to happen for someone to say I am living with HIV and I'm completely okay with it. And I am not going to conform to anything that you guys say about people who are living with HIV, and being so able to still call out stigma on behalf of other people. So in terms of the external, it's literally just, yeah, those things. The internal stigma though, that was what I suffered from the most. I used to feel like literally everyone could see it on my face. Especially in the beginning, I felt like everyone could like see that I was living with HIV. Even in the beginning of my disclosure, I lied and said, I just found out now at 18, because I didn't want my friends and people to start asking, what took you so long? You stayed quiet for 4 years. What took you so long? So I used to lie and say, no, I just found out now at 18. So in as much as people were finding me courageous and brave, I was so hard on myself. I just felt like you're out here telling people to be so honest and owning their truth, but you are not really doing that. So I was really hard on myself. That is why I struggled so much with the internal stigma. There is still stigma here in South Africa. I see it a lot, especially on people who are not as open about their HIV status. Literally every day, I'm not even exaggerating, literally every day, I get a new message from a completely new person who tells me that different stories with how they get mistreated because they are living with HIV. And that goes to show just how much the stigma is still rife. And because I literally just spoke about empathy, that is why I'm going to keep on saying that in as much as I am not the one who is always on the receiving end of the stigma, I completely understand and I believe every story is valid. And I will keep on saying, we are living with HIV, but we are so greater than it.
Absolutely. No, that the internal stigma, the self stigma is huge, and it's interesting because there is, you know, if you look at all different groups that will have experienced some kind of discrimination, we all have it. You know, for the longest time I've had internalized homophobia, you know, and for the longest time I felt shame because of the color of my skin, you know, or because I'm a woman, you know. So I almost think half the battle is being able to conquer that self stigma, because once you do that, people around you don't dare say anything to you, because you're like, hey, I fought the biggest battle on stigma, and that was against myself. So talking to you is like a walk in the park.
Yeah.
Rory, but how do you think we're doing here in Ireland when it comes to stigma? I said it to, you know, we still have to meet people who are very open about their status, but also from a national campaign, it's not something that's quite spoken about from that perspective, you know. Like, we've seen the amount of messages we have received since last March around COVID, you know, and all these, you know, people are just glued to their TV sets, and we'll remember those moments when the Taoiseach made I'll never forget Leo Varadkar's first announcement about the lockdown. I think not every single person in Ireland was watching that, you know. So imagine if we had not even the same extent, but a fraction of that national campaign, a public health campaign around HIV and AIDS, what a difference that would make.
I'm old enough to remember when we did have a national HIV campaign, and I don't know, we can maybe separate that from some of the stigma discussion today, because it was the kind of music you hear when the shark is approaching, in Jaws, and black and white, and it was like death. It was terrible, and it wasn't empowering, and it came when the stories of people dying in the States, and very much mediated through that US story of HIV, which was very gay as well, in terms of it wasn't really in while straight people could get HIV, it was more a gay thing in terms of the discussion. And then HIV became something that, and it's terrible, it was an othered thing, and the discussion moved to how the epidemic was affecting sub-Saharan Africa, and the public health piece went quiet, here. And so we haven't had a balancing discourse, sort of balancing public discourse, in my opinion, outside of groups that self-cared, like the gay men in Ireland have a very strong discourse, although maybe that's weakened as well, looking at numbers. There was good work done within, drug, around needle using drug users, but it stayed within its ghettos. What we haven't got is representation of people living successfully with HIV in our art, except to make sort of instrumentalized points. Just a family living with HIV, normally in a soap opera, but it's not the defining thing. Irish people aren't like Sadie. There isn't a discourse where people just come out and have this positive discourse. It happens in all the countries I go to in Africa. People wear the T-shirts and say they're positive, and there's a space for that discourse. We haven't quite got that, and there's a danger too of complacency. I mean, the downside of some of the medicine and some of the advances in therapies is that people aren't maybe as careful with themselves as they could be. And that points to a need for a broader discourse around not just HIV and AIDS, a whole suite of STIs where frankly we don't have a very grown-up discourse with ourselves, and where where, if we're being honest, over the last 15 or 20 years, the incidence has gone up quite a lot. So it requires leadership, it requires education, and it requires a different kind of role model. I think, and a real honest national discussion around representation as well. And as not to put it, I talked earlier on about the importance of personal testimony, and I do think that's really important. But we can't just put it on individuals to stand up and put their hand up. That's abdicating responsibility. So there is more that should be done. Maybe out of COVID we can get there, but I think we'd have to be deft and careful in putting that question to policymakers as well, because they're distracted. But it's not just to policymakers, it's to playwrights, it's to musicians. I mean, it's great that musicians like John Grant are just, I'm HIV positive and so what, and listen to my music. But there's not enough, of the sort of normal day-to-day, I'm just living with this and I have a great life kind of story.
Absolutely, those are the stories we really need to get out. The mom next door, or the dad down the street, or just regular people just getting on with their life with their HIV status. So just a few messages have come in. We want to acknowledge the newly formed HIV plus Human Rights Defenders movement, designed to facilitate people living with HIV to use their own voices in combating human rights abuses and ending HIV and HIV-related stigma. We especially appreciate the work of James O'Connor, who's here in Ireland and who's a dear friend of mine, and many who are here today. And An Rianto. An Rianto, who's from Indonesia, for assisting in getting the notice of our wonderful annual Father Michael Kelly lecture to an audience of 25,000 people living with HIV today. Anne shares that there are still many issues in Indonesia with 4.5% viral load suppression among 409.857 thousand people living with HIV, issues of stigma, adherence in medication, access to medication, and much more. They urge the Irish government and Global Fund to collaborate with all of the international embassies in Indonesia so they can get their people to reach everyone. Wow. Okay. So thank you. So that's a message to acknowledge HIV plus human rights defenders movement. Then over to the chat box. Rory de Burka is so absolutely right. Thank you. And that's for Merlin. You should screenshot that, Rory, whenever you're feeling down. See, I told you I was right. This guy said I'm right. So then loads of beautiful messages for Sadie. Well said, Sadie, and all the panelists talking about it and calling out specific incidents and issues is an important start. That's from Georgina. Then we have a question here from Breda Gahan. Who doesn't know Breda? Who is she's a national treasure, global treasure, not national, global treasure when it comes to HIV. So her question is, how can we better engage men and boys to protect and prevent HIV infection among women and girls during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence and beyond? And that's from Breda Gahan. Who would like to take that? Marika?
I can start, and let me just start by saying it's really lovely to be in this panel, and I wish we were all in Dublin so I could hug you all.
Yeah, I know. We'll just bank those hugs. We'll bank them.
Exactly, we'll bank them. Once you can all vaccinate us, we'll do it. No, I think it's absolutely, Breda is absolutely right. I don't know Breda, I absolutely agree. I think it's especially the involvement of men and boys, especially important beyond, not just during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And I think collectively, and including the Global Fund in the beginning, when we really started focusing on HIV prevention among adolescent girls and young women, a lot of the activities were really focused on protecting adolescent girls and young women, but they don't live in a vacuum. They live in societies, they engage with men, and they mostly got, there's lots of really good tracking done in South Africa by Kwaraisa and Salim Abdul Karim, that most of the young girls who get infected, they get infected because they're in relationships with men in the early 30s, or HIV positive, who are not aware of their status, who are not on treatment. And so there's only so little you can do by empowering young girls. And if they have unprotected sex with men who are unaware of their status. And that's really complex. It's complex because men traditionally don't access health services. Very often it's not seen as manly to go to clinic. Also in many countries, the health services don't really cater for men. And they're seen as services for women and children, but not necessarily for men. I think increasingly we start to see what we can do to engage men in a more effective way. And it's not just to wave a finger at men that you're bad and you should change your behavior, but just see how we can also improve the situation, the health-seeking behavior of men. How do we get men tested? Can men access treatment? And so it's absolutely a very important point. And bit by bit, our programs for HIV prevention among adolescent girls and young women, they do include men and boys, because by just focusing on the men, on the girls and women, will not be able to solve their problems. And will not be able to improve life in society, because at the end of the day, we're all part of society. Thank you.
Absolutely. And here in Ireland, I suppose, how can we get men and boys to have this conversation? Because I even think simple things as reproductive matters, it's like, it's up to the woman to go get the pill. really bugs me. That really bugs me because, taking the pill as well has its own, side effects. And there's a lot of research that's come out recently about mental health issues that women have experienced because of it, So how can we get men to be more empowered and just more confident about these matters and getting tested, because I know in the gay community, gosh, it's so at the forefront of our minds around getting tested, using condoms. The good old days when you used to go to a gay bar, you'd be having your drink with your friend, and then somebody will just come over to your table and pop some condoms on your table. You'd be like, just in case you guys get lucky, So that is, and I keep saying, imagine if that was done in straight bars, I can just imagine that Irish people just running out the door going, oh my God, I'm so mortified. Can you imagine? Rory, what do you think?
Well, I can't speak for every Irish man in this conversation, right? So don't put that on me. Look, I think it's a case of to misquote a political slogan, a lot done, more to do, and it's a holistic issue. I mean, these aren't questions that we answer just through the prism of health. I mean, it's broader issues around respect and voice, and I think it comes back to empowerment. It comes back to education. It comes back to ease of access, and and questions around stigma, lack of stigma, and there are different bits and pieces that I think we have some of the jigsaw pieces. I don't think we've quite put them all together. But you see things like men's sheds and that sort of male mental health question coming higher up in the hierarchy of discussion, and I don't know that we can separate that from men and boys taking better care of their their girlfriends, wives, or boyfriends, or whatever it may be. And so I think we have elements. I think we have to join it together. And I think there's a challenge to those who want this to happen to continue to make good public policy arguments to politicians so that they feel empowered to keep moving forward and joining the dots. And I think then globally, if I can kind of go from the specific to the general, I think there's something we need to watch. And that is, there has been a rollback around concepts of gender in global discourse over the last number of years, which I think is around closing space for open discussion around sexuality and around respect for for and between men and women and the spaces in between. And the spaces in between are very, very contested in that discourse. So I think we have to be careful, and I think we have to be vigilant that international normative space that pulls governments into good directions isn't narrowed, and that requires, again, citizens to make sure that they're vigilant about the space that they allow their politicians to occupy. So I think it's both levels. I think we have to work nationally, but I think we've also got to be careful about making sure we keep that international space open.
Very good. We are coming to nearing the end. So I want to ask you each one a question, really, in relation to action. What do you hope, and I suppose everyone here today can do for the coming year, with everything, all the uncertainty, and who knows what 2021 will look like. I still think of the guy who so it was some video of a guy who walked out of his house with his 2020 diary and just chucked it. And he said, thanks a lot to 2020. I won't be needing that, So let's hope that we won't be doing that with our 2021 diaries. So what can people do to make sure that we don't forget that there's before the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a HIV and AIDS pandemic. So what can we do? I'll go to Marika, then Rory, and then final word to Sadie.
What can we do? You mean to? I think it's a really difficult question, and I wish there were easier answers. I think for us, it's really important to see HIV and COVID-19 as one and the same fight. I think every pandemic has demonstrated that the most vulnerable people in societies are the ones that are most affected. And even in countries where the death toll because of COVID was relatively low, the sort of the social and economic impact and the impact on people's lives of the lockdowns and all the measures that have been taken have been dramatic. And we know that a lot of people will be thrown into poverty. We know that a lot of people with other health conditions will not have had the access to healthcare that they required. So I think for us, it's really important that we see those at the same fight. It's the same fight. We have to make sure that as we address COVID-19, that we keep our eye on the ball of HIV. I think most importantly, it was something that I forgot to say in one of the first questions, that we really have to realize that no one is safe until everyone is safe. And as a global community, we cannot afford that we have access to vaccines. Maybe even at the end of this year, early next year, they will be rolled out in high-income countries. And then I keep our eye off the ball and think, well, the lower middle-income countries have to sort themselves out because it's not their business anymore. I think we are really at the crossroads of really defining what global solidarity means. We have a unique opportunity. I think if you look at the science of the last year, it's absolutely breathtaking and having so many developments. And the world has shown what it can do if we join forces and work together. But also a lot of it has been driven by the fear in our societies, in the rich country societies. And so this is really the crossroads where we can demonstrate that global solidarity is not just a hollow term we use to look nice in public, but just to walk the talk and make sure that that we continue the fight against COVID-19, even if it's not a big problem in our countries anymore, the same as we should gear up our efforts to finish AIDS, TB, and malaria by 2030. Let's stop there.
Thank you, Marika. Rory?
I suppose if there's one good thing about 2020 is we've discovered a year could be a decade long. And that means we've got 100 years over the next 10 to sort out HIV and AIDS if the world moves to 2020 time. But I suppose Marika talked about sort of no one is safe till everyone is safe. And I think there has been a recognition about the how interconnected we are globally. And I think we have to make sure that as vaccines get rolled out, and probably quicker in the rich world than in the developing world, that we don't lose that sense of interconnectedness, because I think one of the lessons that I think we have to take from this year, and it builds on what we've learned from the struggle with HIV and AIDS, is the importance of continuous investment in public health systems globally, and there's more to go there. And I think if we can do that, we'll make a lot of progress by 2030. And I don't like putting responsibility on individuals to step up, because I think that's difficult. But we do need people with the bravery of people like Sadie to help us in that as well, because unfortunately, if we're talking about large numbers, humans can't contemplate and grasp large numbers, but the power of individual stories and that kind of narrative at reinforcing solidarity and coming back to the empathy. We can empathize with a person, we can't empathize with a million people. It's just, we can't do that. So that's why, today is important, and empowering people to let us join in their personal story is important as well, to make sure that we keep that sense of solidarity coming up. And then we have to make choices, and some of the choices about money and how we balance out those money choices if we want to show solidarity. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Dylan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rory. And final word to you, Sadie. Under pressure, we've got just a few minutes left. What are your final words in relation to what you hope people watching this will do to make sure that we keep renew our efforts in relation to eradicating HIV and AIDS by 2030?
I do hope that what we should try to do now is try not to exclude or neglect HIV while focusing on COVID. In South Africa, in the beginning of the lockdown, I remember there were reports that about 11,000 people who are living with HIV did not collect their medication. That's a huge number for people to for there to be reports about people missing treatment in 1 month. We should try to focus on COVID because it is important, but we should not neglect HIV programs. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Sadie. As a mom, I know what I'm going to do, and I do this very often with my kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I always ask them, where do you live? And initially my son was a bit confused, but then he said, is it a house? And he's like, he said, my body. I was like, exactly. That's where you live. That's your first home on this earth, is your body. If you can look after your home, your body, because you don't have anywhere else to live. If you don't look after it, what's going to happen? So very simple messages that will help. As parents, I always consider parents as the primary educators of our children. And if we can, wherever in the world we are brave as parents to have these conversations with our children. Do you know what? Job done. Because they really will live life with a greater awareness already from the start, as opposed to us coming to this awareness later on in life. So a huge thank you to everyone today. I need to where am I? So a huge thank you to the speakers, Irish Aid, Irish Global Health Network, the Gay Community News for live streaming this wonderful event on Facebook and on Twitter, and on YouTube, and of course our youth choir, Jandiri and Suso. Thank you so much for your amazing efforts, and thank you so much for asking me to be your moderator again, because this is, like, as I said, it's one of the highlights of the year for me, because I get so much from this event, because there's absolute in like solidarity, in the face of HIV at a time of global crisis. We need more events like this. We need to feel that we are standing shoulder to shoulder, even though it's virtually at the moment. We are still standing shoulder to shoulder globally in our fight against COVID and in our fight against HIV and AIDS. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Father Michael Kelly, I hope you enjoyed the lecture, honoring you. Thank you so much for your words. And now we're going to play out on the video again, which is, of course, the choirs, Jandiri, and the other choir, the Irish-based choir, which is Suso. Take it away. Thank you, folks. Stay well.
Learn to see in the dark. Open your heart. What do you stand for? If you don't know what you stand for, how can I find you? Change the rules of the game. Things will never be the same. I'm so glad to know your name.
You can start with your heart, where you're at. Can't you feel this connection? We are all the way we are. Before you speak, word is word. sweet, the spice is left beneath the tears. Can you feel that?